That's good. Yeah.
It's 3:05 p.m. on Wednesday, the 21st of May, 2014. I'm Marc Strassman, reporter with Utopia News. I'm about to talk to Graham, Michael, and Mikaela, members of Fossil Free Stanford. They're in the old Union Building on the Stanford campus near Palo Alto, California. I'm in Los Angeles. Welcome, all of you, to Utopia News.
Thanks very much.
Why don't we start by talking about the origins of Fossil Free Stanford? When did it come into being and why?
All right, so Fossil Free Stanford came into being about 18 months ago in the fall of 2012. It was part of a national and global movement of students at college campuses around the world encouraging their universities to divest their endowments from fossil fuels.
Yeah, it picked up on the heels of Bill McKibben's Do the Math tour. He toured the country doing big talks and trying to inspire students on various college campuses. And he came to Palo Alto and he presented a mechanism by which a lot of us could actually kind of combine our voices and make bigger change, and that was divestment. And so we started up right after that.
All right, and Mikaela, when did you get involved?
So I'm a freshman, so I didn't get involved until the beginning of this year. But basically, as soon as I got here, I found Fossil Free, and they're an amazing group of people. So it's very exciting to get involved in.
Before we go any further, tell me the significance of the orange squares on your chests.
Sure. The orange square is it's a national and at this point actually international symbol. They chose orange instead of green because this movement goes beyond just the basic environmental movement. It gets to bigger social justice issues, and it's based on the Quebec workers movement, which was their symbol was a red square.
All right, good. And what's your current mission there at Fossil Free Stanford? What are you trying to do?
All right, so our mission from the beginning has been to convince the university to divest its endowment from the 200 largest publicly traded fossil fuel companies. So what Stanford just did was to divest from coal industry, which is a huge first step, the first major university to do that. However, we're going to continue pushing to divest from the rest of the fossil fuel industry, that is oil and gas companies, whose business models are also not compatible with the safe climate.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that. Is it your view that all of the fossil fuels now in reserves ought to stay in the ground?
It's not all of them. It's about 80% that we hope to stay in the ground because that's what would keep us under a 2-degree level of warming. But the issue is that because these fossil fuel companies already have enough carbon reserves to push us well beyond that level, and they're still looking for more reserves, their business model is really incompatible with a safe climate.
So you're saying that it's not a good business model as well as environmentally unsound?
Right, especially as carbon legislation rolls out around the globe, as you get carbon taxes and restrictions on how much CO2 you can pollute and effectively how much fossil fuel you can burn. The reserves that those companies already own and control around the world are going to become more and more less and less valuable. More unvaluable is what I was going to say. And it's a concept called the carbon bubble. And so it's not a good investment from a financial standpoint on behalf of people investing in those companies, but it's also just an unsustainable business model.
When you made your case to the Stanford administration, did you stress the environmental or the financial aspects of divestment?
Largely the environmental and the moral aspects, because Stanford tries to, through the advisory panel on investment responsibility, they try to invest responsibly in manners that will not cause, the phrasing that they use is substantial social injury. And so what we tried to show them and what they eventually agreed with respect to coal was that these fossil fuels are causing substantial social injury via climate change.
You know, if they're causing substantial social injury, that's good enough for the Stanford Board of Trustees to vote to divest coal then?
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
And what exactly, in more detail, did they say they were going to do about coal to start with?
So the details aren't really publicly available, and so we don't know some of the specifics. Essentially, they said that they were going to divest any direct holdings and any holdings that are managed specifically on behalf of Stanford. We think that they are divesting from mutual funds that include coal stocks, but we're not certain of that. And they're recommending to their external managers that they follow these same criteria.
And what have they said they're going to do about oil and gas?
Well, they've kind of left it open for oil and gas. They've said they're going to continue doing more research, but they really wanted to get something done by the end of this year about coal.
All right, and speaking of getting something done, now at Harvard, a protester was, with your point of view, was arrested for trying to get a forum to discuss the issue of divestment at Harvard. And in your case, you've worked with the Board of Trustees and gotten what seems to be a substantial achievement in the direction of divestment. What are the differences, would you say, between the Harvard case and the Stanford case that enabled you to succeed where they're still trying?
These guys might have other things to say on this, but I think one of the biggest and most important factors, and one of the reasons we actually were lucky, was that there was a body called the Advisory Panel on Investment Responsibility and Licensing, APIRL, which was set up in the 80s in response to the call by students and by faculty on our campus, but also across the country, to divest from companies operating in apartheid South Africa. And so that APIRL was a body that still exists today. It's composed of faculty and staff, as well as students and alumni. And we were able to go through that official channel to go ahead and submit a formal request for review to get Stanford and that group, the APIRL, as well as the management company, which is the group that actually does Stanford's official investing, to go ahead and look at divestment. So we didn't have to do what some other schools are doing and try to communicate directly with their boards of trustees or boards of directors. And we had that intermediary. So I think that was one of the biggest.
Right. So you had an institutional infrastructure.
Precisely.
That was conducive to what you wanted to do.
Precisely. Yeah.
And ironically or not, that was the legacy of the anti-apartheid movement previously.
Right. And we're lucky that they went ahead and laid that framework for us. Because if it wasn't there, then this would have been a very different ballgame.
So you're standing on this. You're building on the achievements of giants already. So.
Sir Isaac Newton, certainly.
Isaac Newton on their shoulders. So what are your next steps? It's coming up to the summertime, and I'm wondering what your plans are for continuity for your organization going forward.
I probably shouldn't address this because I'm graduating.
Well, let's talk about that. Yeah, you're graduating. You're a freshman. How do you? Is the organization is larger than the three of you? I hope, isn't it?
Certainly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And I'm the only one graduating, actually.
Yeah, of our entire team, which is about 20 people, we only have one graduate, so there'll be a lot of continuity. So we'll miss that.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. And will you be active over the summer?
We'll be spread around. We'll be pretty dispersed, but the folks that will be on campus intend to be very active. We're lucky that we're close to the headquarters of 350.org, which is based just across the San Francisco Bay in Oakland. And we work with them a lot in terms of building logistical support. And so I think there will be a lot of communication there. But we'll be here, and we'll be still keeping the dialogue going with faculty and with staff, and hopefully with the same administrators that facilitated the process of divestment from coal.
Well, are you going to submit a similar proposal for divestment from oil and gas?
The details are a little bit unclear to us of whether we have to submit a new request or whether the previous request is still ongoing. But in either case, we definitely plan to continue working with the same advisory panel.
The issue being that our original request called for divestment from a list of 200 companies rated by the amount of carbon in their reserves. So it was the 200 publicly traded companies, 100 coal, 100 oil and gas, with the largest amount of carbon in their reserves. So Stanford went ahead and chose to go for just the coal part, and that was a decision on the part of the advisory committee that we were talking about, the advisory panel, but also the board of trustees.
And that includes divesting in the 300 largest coal companies that Stanford had investments in.
It looks like it's going to be a list of about 100. They're going to set up some dynamic parameters that can change as the control of those reserves changes among companies, but it looks like about 100.
And how public will that list be?
We have no idea. Stanford, because it's a private institution, does not have to be transparent with its investment strategies, and doesn't. It's not transparent. They will probably go ahead and put out, once this has been once the details have all been hashed out, the Stanford Management Company will probably go ahead and put out some kind of statement on what those are based on, but our best guess is that they will not actually disclose exactly what those will look like.
Okay. Talk a little bit about your own personal motivation for being involved in this effort.
I can talk about where I'm coming from. For a long time, I had trouble. I love the environment, like I love the outdoors. But I had trouble kind of viewing myself as an environmentalist because I thought problems with people were the biggest problem, like people who are suffering now, and I felt like we had to deal with that first. But I think what really kind of shifted my vision of this, when I was talking to one of my friends and she told me, there are problems with people now, but those will all get so much worse. And all of these issues around justice and around poverty in the world will get worse because of climate change. So I feel like this is such a pressing issue to be working on. Like, if you care about people, then you should care about climate change.
And what you're talking about is climate justice, right?
Absolutely.
Talk about that concept, Graham. Before you may have to go soon. Say something about climate justice and what that means to you.
All right. Well, I can stick around for a few minutes.
Okay, good. We're glad to have you. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So climate justice is essentially the idea that the impacts of climate change are going to be felt disproportionately by people in poor and marginalized communities, and these are the people who've done the least to cause the problem. So these people are going to be the most susceptible to increased droughts and flooding, to rising sea levels, to increased tropical disease, and all these sorts of things. And they really haven't emitted very many greenhouse gases. They're not responsible for the problem, and there's not very much they can do to stop it. So it's really a justice.
And what are you calling for? What's your overall vision and plan, Michael? What would you say the end point or the future point you're trying to get to in the environmental arrangements?
Right. That's a big question. I don't know that I can even speak for the group on that one, but
speak for yourself.
I know that divestment is a strategy. It's a means to an end. The bigger goal being a world powered by clean energy that's not driving catastrophic climate change, which is what we're headed towards right now. If our entire planet were able to continue its development towards a situation where people could move out of poverty and could develop, but without causing massive damage to others through externalities, through if I take an action, I burn my fossil fuels, it's going to hurt other people somewhere else, disadvantage them. I think that's the ultimate. So, for example, I was involved previously in a lot of other sustainability organizations trying to change behaviors of consumers here in the U.S., trying to do a lot of other things that would affect the choices people make as individuals. I think what's different about divestment, and I think where divestment is headed, is bigger. I think we're trying to scale up. We're looking at institutional change towards that clean energy future.
And where did what was the effect of Stanford divesting coal on the rest of the movement for divestment?
Well, we've definitely seen some more momentum. Like, I don't know if you just noticed that the governor of California called on the UC system to divest. And in other schools, people are getting meetings with their board of trustees. So hopefully what we've done is we've given a lot of legitimacy to the movement, because we've shown that the argument that endowments should be used only for profit and should not be used for moral reasons is invalid, because we're obviously using our endowment to take a moral stance. And we've also shown that divestment is a way of standing up to these companies.
It's very interesting. At Stanford, the issue is framed as a moral purpose, and at Harvard, it's called a political purpose by the administration. And they say we can't do, the endowment is for making money for the school. we can't use it for political purposes. But you've said, Stanford has said it can be used for moral purposes. So there's a difference in the way the issue is being framed. Could any of you say anything about how your frame could be more widely disseminated so that people could see it? Or is that just a particularly Stanford centric criterion that won't necessarily work everywhere else? Or what do you think about that?
Well, I think our goal is also political change, because some of the biggest mechanisms for change, biggest levers, are in our political system. Our goal is to create a big space for dialogue, to push our legislators towards climate positive legislation. I know I just said the word legislation.
What do you want the climate positive legislators to do? What's your program for them?
I mean, it's going to depend on exactly. I'll mention that one in a moment. But I think we are driving towards political change as well. But this shouldn't be a political issue inherently. This should be a moral issue, is what we've always argued for. This is not something that should be partisan. It shouldn't be divisive in Congress, because this is an issue of our actions now affecting people now, as the new National Climate Assessment says, but also affecting people in the future. And so, that could take the different people on our team, for example, are going to, have different opinions here, but a carbon tax, a national carbon tax, or a cap and trade system, like was proposed.
Well, in the national legislature, the Republicans oppose those, and the Democrats more or less support them.
Right.
How does it keep from becoming partisan?
It doesn't, and it hasn't, and our politics are gridlocked more than ever now. But the idea is, if we can show that our generation, as young people, as the folks in college right now, aren't happy with the status quo, and we're not about to just sit back once we graduate from here and watch it happen, but rather 2,800 Stanford students, 78% of our undergrad body, are voting for divestment. They're voting for big change already just in our undergrad careers. So I think our hope is that it really pushes politicians to understand that constituencies are changing and that people really want action of some kind.
Okay, that's good. I want to thank you for your work and for talking to us about it today on Etopia News, and I hope we can talk again after a while to get an update on what you've done and what you're continuing to do. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.